Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you go ahead and get us started off, Lynn? Give us a sense of place and introduce everyone. And
Trinity's a very valuable person is Rubie Plant Butterworth. Her roots go into the bird family, and we're here in her apartment at Westminster Oaks on May the 17th, 2018. Rubie is going to, I've presented some questions to her to review, and she's going to answer those for us today, and just tell us whatever she can tell us about Trinity and her relationship with her family to Trinity, and her impression of times when Trinity maybe was faltering and they came through with money and with people's lives that saw that Trinity was so important to Tallahassee and to those that are around. Excuse me, and those that are around. So, Rubie, will you please introduce yourself and tell your birthday?
Oh, goodness.
No, we got to have that.
Okay.
Please tell your birthday and your early life at Trinity, and we'll just, as questions, you're talking, things will come to my mind to try to lead you into answering those questions.
Okay, well, I was born in Albany, Georgia, actually, on October the 26th, 1925, which makes me 92 now. My early memories of Trinity start when we moved to Tallahassee. My mother had grown up here, and my daddy had come over to work and met Mother. He was from Madison. But they lived in South Georgia for several years and then came to Tallahassee, and I was maybe 7 or 8 years old at that time. So that's when my real memories of Trinity start.
Your siblings?
What?
You have siblings that came?
I have a sister that's younger. She was probably in kindergarten when we came to Tallahassee. So we both have a lot of memories. She was married at Trinity. I was not. We were living in North Carolina at the time. I was, and married there. But my family were early settlers on both my grandmother and my grandfather's side of the family in Lynn County back in the early 1800s when Lynn County first became a territory. After the Civil War, my great-grandfather moved into Tallahassee. His family had been on the Bradford plantation during the war, and then he moved his family into town. And by then, my grandfather had moved from Mississippi into town and started a grocery business.
Your grandfather, namely?
My grandfather was Thomas Bird, T.B. Bird, and he started a grocery business that had telephone number 1 when telephones came to Tallahassee, and served. That store stayed open until the 1960s when my uncle had it and closed it.
Can you give us tell us the location of that in Tallahassee?
The first location was on Monroe Street between College and Park Avenues on the west side of the street. Right, I think about the middle of the block. My first memory of it was there. Then they moved up on Tennessee Street, I think probably where the Capital City Bank parking lot is, by the bank. And then out to Thomasville Road, where Whataburger lately has been, but back then was Bird's. That's a little bit of the family story.
Mm-hmm.
Leroy Collins was a member of my grandfather's Sunday school class at Trinity, and remembers him fondly and has written about him, and had his first job at Bird's.
At Bird's.
Yes, and he always remembered that experience and wrote about it in the St. Petersburg Times in recent years.
Rubie, I want to get these names now. This was your grandmother, Bird. Your grandmother was a Bird.
My grandmother was a Bernard, who married a Bird.
Okay.
And her name was Rubie. That's her picture over there. But her father was Jesse Bernard. He had been a mayor of Tallahassee. His father was a circuit rider in Virginia, and of course had work on the side. He wasn't always traveling and preaching, but he was a Methodist preacher.
So Jesse came to Tallahassee on his own, or was the family? He came
on his own after he graduated from college. He taught in a little school in Louisiana, and then he found out that they needed somebody to teach on the plantations in north of Tallahassee, and so he knew a man in Monticello who had told him about this, and he came here to teach the children on the plantations. And one of the plantations was my great-great-grandfather, Thomas Bradford's plantation. And his children, some of his children were in the school, and one of the girls was Mary Elizabeth Bradford, and he met her and married her. So they settled in Alachua County at first until the Civil War, and then he brought his young family up to the Bradford plantation to stay while he was away. He was in Lee's army at the end of the war and was at Appomattox when
Jesse
Bernard
was. Wow.
And I have his permission to travel home in a scrapbook here.
Golly.
But that's all not connected to Trinity. He stayed in Tallahassee.
They were Trinity members, though. Is that?
I guess by the time he came back from the war and moved into town, they became members of Trinity. And of course, when his daughter Rubie married Thomas Bird at Trinity, they, of course, were members, and all the children were baptized there. There were 8 children, and they were all baptized.
So your mother was one of 8?
My mother was one of 8. Okay. She was Janet. She was the 6th child. Yeah, she was the 6th child in that family.
So we have names now that are in Trinity records. We have Bird name, we have Bernard name, we have Bradford name, and then the plant name.
And Taylor.
And Taylor.
Martha Tilden is the daughter of Elizabeth Bird Taylor, who was the youngest of the Bird children.
So your mother's sister's child? Okay, so she's your first cousin.
And Martha and I are the only ones now, I guess, in the family that are members of Trinity. Others have moved away or joined other churches. One of Mother's sisters was one of the charter members at St. Paul when that was organized.
One of your mother's sisters was a charter member?
Yeah.
Okay,
My
that would be
Aunt
the
Rubie,
early 50s.
actually.
Your mother's name was Janet.
Right.
Your aunt's name was Rubie.
That one.
Okay.
And Martha's mother was Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. Okay. Tell this, we'll pick up with your moving down from Albany to Tallahassee. And so you went to school here? I
went to Caroline Brevard School. The Bird home was on the block. They owned the block that Caroline Brevard was built on. They sold that property to the school board for the old Caroline Brevard School on
So,
Calhoun Street.
Calhoun and Gaines, or Calhoun?
Well, it was
and-
between Madison and Gaines.
Okay, okay.
And then they built a home just a block away on the corner of Gaines and Monroe. There's a parking garage there now.
That would
For
be
the
the
state.
southwest corner?
Southeast.
Southeast, okay, the
Uh-huh.
parking lot there, okay, southeast corner of Gaines and South Monroe,
Right.
okay.
And that's after my grandmother passed away, we moved into that house and lived there till I was in high school.
The trains didn't bother you?
Well, all the windows were open, you couldn't help but hear the
train,
trains.
yeah.
All the cars going down the hill and over the bump, because it was just a two-lane road. Monroe was just a two-lane street.
So close to Cascades Park today,
Right.
and to the Cascades ball field at one time.
Oh, yeah, the Centennial Field was just a block down the hill from my house. And just a couple of blocks south of the Capitol, and we children played all over the Capitol, and there was a park in front of the school on Madison up to, what was the next street? Was it Jefferson?
Madison, Jefferson,
Anyhow, there was a park in there in front of the
Pensacola's
school.
in there.
And there were tennis courts there, and we played up there a good bit, and in the school grounds.
So from Carolyn Brevard, you went to the old
Lynn for 1 year.
Which was where Lively
Where-
became, and then now it's the
Now
present
it's the-
library.
It's the library.
Yeah, the present library.
But I was in the 7th grade there, and then we went to the new school. I still think of it as a new school.
So
How many years
that's me,
ago
I want
was
you to put
that?
it in perspective now, because it's in the new Leon High School was built in your time, and so you went to that as a new.
1938, 1937 maybe, that we moved in there.
You moved to that, and that was out of town then.
Oh, it was, yeah. But I walked to school every day
Uh-huh.
from South Monroe until we moved out on Terrace Street, and I still walk to school every day from there.
So then Leon, and then your, were there any happenings in high school where you, that you wanted to share with us, that the May Day, maybe that's kind of the big
May
thing?
Day was the biggest thing that happened during the year.
Annual
yes.
basis,
Electing the May Queen and guessing who the king would be, and
Was he elected also, or
no,
was
no.
he was
Queen-
selected? The Queen
Queen
selected his
selected her king.
Her king.
Yes,
Was that a ballot by the students? Who
for the Queen. Yes.
for the Queen?
hmm
For the seniors only, or for?
No, for the whole school. As
school.
I remember,
Uh-huh.
when I was at Caroline Brevard, children still participated, and our grade selected a costume to wear, and we all wore this. I remember one year I was a fairy, and Mother made me a little costume with wings and the works. The next year we were butterflies, so she put spots on the wings.
So were you the participant from your class in the maypole winding?
Some of the class probably were. I think maybe when I was in junior high school I did.
You were one of the participants
Yeah,
in the
we
winding?
had to learn to wind
go in and out,
maypole.
yes.
By the time I was in junior high school, it began to be just a Lynn High School function.
Event,
Event. And although the whole town participated, it was a big event in town.
So were there any guys around Tallahassee that, our names that we would recognize that you dated in high school? Or?
Not so much.
Not so much.
But you,
Okay. So then you stayed at, you graduated from high school in
1942.
42. Then you seeked upper education at?
Florida State College for Women.
Uh-huh.
In December of my senior year at Lynn, of course this was the big event, Pearl Harbor happened.
So we're talking about December of 41.
And then that spring, we graduated from high school. And so my whole college experience was wartime. 1945, the spring, well, I say my senior year was not, because 1945 was when the war ended.
Mm-hmm.
By the time we entered our senior year at Florida State, the war was over. But it was
that was your senior year in college when the war was over?
Yeah,
in
August, and we started back in September. So,
so
it was
you stayed in Tallahassee. Can you please tell us something about the interaction you had as a student, as a young lady at school, and all of these guys coming up from Camp Gordon-Johnston and the ones at Dale Mabry?
There were some events, I guess dances on campus that they attended, and in the summer there were dances in town that we went to, that the guys were there, and some girls met people that they eventually married. I did not.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a number, and a number of girls who left school to marry their boyfriends from other places who were going overseas, and they married before the guys left. And then they would come back to school if they had, if that had been the
Was there a dress code for these guys that when they were out in the community they had to have on uniform?
Oh yes, they wore uniforms all the time.
Huh?
I don't remember any. Maybe they did wear some suit clothes, but it was wartime.
Okay. So you graduated, and your degree is from FSCW?
Right.
Solely?
Solely.
And this was in 45?
46.
46 that you graduated?
Right.
Okay. And then a year later, or was it 2 years later, that FSU became the Gainesville in Tallahassee?
That fall, after we graduated, by then, a number of the men had been discharged from service and had the GI Bill to go to school. And so by the fall of 46, they were flooding the colleges and the universities. And the University of Florida was a men's school. And they could not handle all the men that wanted to go. And so they formed the Tallahassee branch of the University of Florida and housed them at the old Dale Mabry Field that had been closed. And but they still were University of Florida students, not Florida State.
Gosh.
But by spring, when legislature met, they made both schools co-ed. Up until then, there'd been the women's college and the men's.
So if a young lady graduated from FSU in 47, they were both names on?
Both names, because they had already printed the diplomas for graduation by the time the legislature met in the spring. So they added Florida State University to the diplomas that were already printed. I don't know how they worded it.
But they did it for 1 year only?
1 year only.
Okay.
And in 48, it was off Florida State University. But the three classes, every class from FSCW had given a gift to the university at graduation. One class gave the gates, the archway over the entrance to the university, and some other group had given something else. So we three classes got together and decided we would build the Heritage Tower that would commemorate the succession
From transition
from the transition from Florida State College for Women to Florida State University. So it's located near the baseball field, between the baseball field and the stadium. And it has 3 torches on top.
It's still there.
Of course it's there.
I have to look for that. I'm just
look for that because that was the gift of our 3 classes. And I worked on the committee to design it and raise the money for it and get it built and dedicated. And we have a time capsule in one of the columns that's in a walkway around the tower that has the history and the transition from way back with the West Florida Seminary on up to Florida State University.
To the transition time, to that, to the date.
So that's why we call it the Heritage Tower, because it commemorates the transition that has taken place there.
That was on the road to Dale Mabry then. I mean, it was a very traveled road. Would that be right, going out to Pensacola?
Just Pensacola Street, yeah.
But Pensacola went out to the, and Rubie, and then you were at FSCW, and we want to get into Trinity now and your relationship to the church. Were you part of Wesley Foundation on your time in school?
I attended some things, and I knew Miss Alfred Leeper, who was the director then, very well. But being a member of Trinity, I sort of stayed with my church.
So you would go to church on Sunday?
Oh, yes, at Trinity. Yes, we all did. In fact, the foundation had maybe Trinity paid for it, I don't know, but the bus came to the foundation and picked up the girls because they didn't have a church service out there.
Okay.
They just had Sunday school. And then the bus would bring the girls into church.
Now, was Jack Anderson the minister at Trinity during that time?
Yes. Claude Haynes came before toward the end of my college years, but Jack Anderson was there when I was in high school, I guess. I don't remember what year he came.
I don't have that either.
But he's the one I remember really well because he had young people himself.
And I want you to tell, I mean, if you can remember those things that are standing out on Jack, because he was so involved in making the military people at ease when they came to Trinity, and he did writings to the members in the military. Will you comment on how?
Well, every Sunday, if there were military, and there were military men in the congregation, he would have them come out in front of the church and have a picture made that he would send
to their parents?
To the parents. Gosh. And write to them and let them know that their sons were in church. And oftentimes family members would invite them home for dinner. And the occasion I remember when we did, along with an aunt and uncle and mother's brother, another uncle, invited 2 young men to come have dinner with us. And it was the day of Pearl Harbor. And,
that Sunday?
That Sunday.
Wow.
And somebody, one of the employees at the store, called my uncle and said, "Turn on your radio, the Japanese have attacked." And so the guys who were there, the military guys that were there, called the base immediately, and they said, "Get out here as fast as you can." And so they had to leave and get back to the base, and they had announced, as I remember, at the Florida Theater, there was some watching a movie there, they announced that they had to leave and get back to the base. And the war started.
So here you were at FSCW. Tell us your life experience coming up then through that, and you graduated, and what happened after graduation for you?
Well, let me go back.
Okay, go back.
From that experience, that first year I lived in the dorm, we had air raid drills. And we'd have to turn out all the lights in the dorm and go across the street to the basement of the alumni building. And I don't know where all the girls went, but the freshmen that lived in Jenny Murphy, Gilchrist, and Bryan went across the street to the basement and waited till there was an all clear signal, and then we went back to our rooms. But we had several of those practices.
Unannounced?
Well, the siren, yeah.
Unannounced.
The siren would start, and we knew we'd turn out the lights and headed for the Lawman building. But that's one thing I remember. After that, I don't remember any. I didn't live in the dorm after that, but that year we did.
So you came through and what was your study at FSC?
I majored in modern languages, which I really haven't done anything with it except for pleasure. You know, now I recognize some words, but not many. But I enjoyed that. But then after graduation, one of the things that Jack Anderson had done for Trinity was to hire a staff. We never had any staff at Trinity except a custodian to clean the church before services, and I think that was part-time probably. And I don't know whether they paid any of the musicians, the organist or the choir director or not. If they did, it was very little probably. But when he came, he had the church hire Lynn Thompson, Mrs. O.B. Thompson, to be the church secretary. And they set up an office in the old parsonage that was next door. They enclosed the side porch and made a room for the secretary.
The old parsonage, would you tell them where that was located?
It was located east of the church building, between it and the back of the Presbyterian church. It was a frame building, I guess in the style of the day, with a porch on the front and the side, and 2 stories. And because it was on a hill, there were rooms that were underneath that were accessed, I guess, from the side, because there were no steps that went down to that level. And probably when the ministers lived there, it was probably just unfinished area underneath. But they made the kindergarten out of that area.
So the first kindergarten, the first...
well, it was not a weekday. It was just Sunday school.
Oh, you mean the Sunday school? Okay.
Sunday school.
So in the
little children were down there. I don't remember who was on the first floor, maybe the senior high. But I know the primary department, which was the first, second, and third grades, were upstairs. And Mrs. Brown, Led Brown's mother, Miss Allie, and Miss Susie Bridges, Miss Ben Bridges, played the piano, and Miss Allie was the superintendent of the department. And she would lead the little assembly, and they had made up songbooks that we used. And we had a little assembly, and then we'd break up into tiny little rooms that had a kidney-shaped table, and the teacher would sit in the middle of that curve, and the children would sit around the table.
Those type tables in my day. I remember those type Sunday school rooms.
But they would break up into classrooms.
Then how did you become functional in the care of the church in the late 40s, I think it
Yeah.
was, when you were.
When I finished college, I didn't have a job, and had applied for several things to use my language, and of course it was still just very new after the war, and and I was only 20, and there just weren't many jobs for me.
Except the grocery store.
Well, I didn't work in the grocery store, but Mrs. Thompson, Coach Amos Godby had been the coach at Lynn when I was in school. He had been elected superintendent of schools about that time, and he persuaded Lynn Thompson to come work for him in the school office. And so the church was without a secretary. I wasn't much of a secretary. I'd type my term papers, and that's about all I knew about being a secretary. But I was hired to be the church secretary, and knew nothing about what.
Did you handle the finances in there,
I
part of
didn't-
it too?
No.
No.
Warren Anderson was the church treasurer, and he handled the money part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would post all the contributions
Mm-hmm.
to members' records,
Yeah.
which was only, I think you probably still have that little card file, that everything was on those cards. And that was the only file of the membership that we had.
You answered the phone?
I answered the phone. We had a desk that had a well in it, and that desk was still around when I moved back to Tallahassee. One drawer. And the typewriter that was on that desk had a tag on it that said, property of Edwin Larson, treasurer, state of Florida.
And he was a member of the church?
He was a member of the church.
Rubie, your office was in the old parsonage?
It was in the old parsonage where they had enclosed the side porch to make a room.
Kind of drafty in there?
Very drafty. There was nothing under the floorboards, and they weren't real tight. And Hollis Pemberton, Mr. Pemberton, Sr., had made a gas stove out of a galvanized pipe. He drilled holes in it and then put some tin around it. And it was vented out of the window. And if the wind blew through that vent, it blew the flame out. And then I would smell gas and know that I didn't have any heat, I had gas. I don't think I could have been killed by it because there was so much draft in there that it would have saved me. But
you could tell when it was out.
I could tell when it was out, and then I would go light it again.
Will you tell us about